Growing up, my friends, Jake, Emily, and I, always heard rumors about the old, abandoned wing of our school. It was a relic from the past, left untouched for decades, and students claimed it was haunted. Of course, we laughed it off, who wouldn't? But deep down, we were all curious, and that curiosity got the better of us one Friday after school. Jake, being the most daring of the group, suggested we explore it. Emily was hesitant, but the idea of a creepy adventure was too tempting to resist. So, with the school emptying out for the weekend, we snuck through the doors that led to the forbidden part of the building. The first thing that struck us was the temperature. The air was colder, mustier, as if we'd stepped into another world. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls and peeling paint. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, we pressed on, trying to ignore the growing tension in the pit of our stomachs. The hallway was lined with old classrooms, their doors shut tight. We tried a few, but they were all locked. As we reached the end of the corridor, we noticed one door slightly ajar. It creaked as Jake pushed it open, revealing a classroom frozen in time. Dust-covered desks were neatly arranged, and a faded blackboard still bore the ghostly remnants of long-forgotten lessons. "Look at this," Jake whispered, pointing to an old, withered book lying on the teacher's desk. It was a class register, with names and dates from the 1950s. As we flipped through it, Emily suddenly stiffened. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. We all fell silent, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, but then we heard a faint, rhythmic tapping, like someone drumming their fingers on a desk. The sound echoed through the hallway, growing louder and more distinct. "Maybe it's just the building settling," I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was racing. But then the tapping stopped abruptly, replaced by a soft, shuffling noise. It sounded like footsteps, moving slowly down the hallway toward us. We exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to do. The logical part of me knew it was probably nothing, but the fear in my chest was overwhelming. "We should go," Emily urged, her eyes wide with fear. Jake, still trying to play it cool, nodded, but I could see he was just as scared as the rest of us. We hurried out of the classroom, back into the hallway, where the shuffling sound had stopped. The silence was deafening, the kind that makes your ears ring. As we made our way back toward the main part of the school, the lights began to flicker again, this time more violently. Just as we reached the door, they went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Emily let out a small gasp, and I could feel my own panic rising. But before we could react, the lights flickered back on, and the door to the abandoned wing slammed shut behind us with a loud bang. We didn't wait to find out what had caused it. We sprinted back to the safety of the main school, our hearts pounding in our chests. Once we were out of the building, we stopped to catch our breath, looking back at the now silent wing. None of us said anything, but we didn't need to. We knew we had experienced something that couldn't be easily explained. The rumors about the haunted hallway were more than just stories, they were real. To this day, we've never gone back to that part of the school. We told a few close friends about our experience, but most just laughed it off as a prank. But we know the truth, and that's enough. The memories of that cold, eerie hallway still linger, a reminder that some places are best left undisturbed. It was supposed to be just another boring day after school. My friends, Hannah, Mark, and I had decided to stay late to finish a group project. Our school was old, a century at least, with creaky floors, drafty hallways, and more stories of hauntings than students. Of course, we never believed any of them until that day. We were working in one of the newer classrooms when Mark got the idea to explore the abandoned part of the school. It was a section that had been closed off for years due to structural issues, though everyone knew it was because of the creepy stories that surrounded it. Teachers never talked about that wing, and students were strictly forbidden from going there. Naturally, we were curious. "Come on, it'll be fun," Mark urged, grinning as he packed up his books. "I don't know, guys," Hannah said, nervously biting her lip. "What if we get caught? Nobody's here but us," I reassured her. "Just a quick look. What's the worst that could happen?" Reluctantly, Hannah agreed, and the three of us headed toward the darkened hallway that led to the old wing. As soon as we crossed the threshold, the air grew noticeably colder. The light from our phones cast long shadows on the walls, making the faded, peeling wallpaper look even more sinister. We walked down the hallway, past rows of old, locked doors. The silence was heavy, as if the building itself was holding its breath. We were about to turn back when Mark stopped in front of a door at the very end. Unlike the others, this one wasn't locked, it was slightly ajar. Should we? Mark whispered, excitement and fear mingling in his voice. Let's just look inside and then leave, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. Mark pushed the door open, and we stepped inside. The room was a time capsule from decades ago. Dusty desks, a chalkboard covered in faded writing, and old books strewn across the floor. But what really caught our attention was the single desk in the middle of the room. It was unlike the others, newer, with a notebook lying open on it. Curious, I picked up the notebook. The pages were filled with scribbles, but one sentence was repeated over and over in shaky handwriting. Let me out. I showed it to Hannah and Mark, and their faces paled. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind us with a deafening bang. Hannah screamed, and Mark lunged for the door, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Panicking, I banged on the door and yelled for help, but our voices seemed to be swallowed by the walls. The room grew colder, and I could see my breath in the air. A strange pressure filled the room, making it hard to breathe. Then, just as suddenly as it had slammed shut, the door swung open. We didn't waste a second. We bolted out of the room, down the hallway, and back into the safety of the newer part of the school. Only when we were outside, gasping for breath, did we stop. What the hell was that? Mark said, his face pale with fear. I don't know, I replied, shaking. But I'm not going back to find out. We never told anyone what happened that day. No one would have believed us anyway. The old wing was sealed off again a few months later, and rumors of strange noises and cold spots began to circulate among the students. We kept our distance, but the memory of that locked classroom and the words in the notebook haunted us for a long time. Sometimes, when I'm alone, I can still hear the faint echo of a voice whispering, "Let me out." It was just another after-school basketball practice, the kind where the sun had already dipped below the horizon and the lights in the gym cast long, eerie shadows. The rest of the team had left early for a game tomorrow, leaving just me, Coach Thompson, and my friend, David, to lock up and make sure everything was in order. Don't take too long, Coach had said with a grin as he handed me the keys. I don't want to hear about you boys slacking off. David and I laughed, but once Coach left, the gym suddenly felt too big, too empty. The silence was almost oppressive. We tossed the basketball around for a bit, trying to ignore the creeping sense of unease that seemed to seep from the walls. As we were about to head out, I heard a faint sound, like a distant echo of laughter, coming from the old storage room at the back of the gym. It was the kind of sound that made your skin crawl, not because it was loud, but because it was so out of place. Did you hear that? I asked David, my voice a little shakier than I'd like to admit. He nodded. Eyes wide? Yeah. But there's no one here. The storage room hadn't been used in years, ever since the school built a new equipment shed outside. The door was always locked, and nobody went in there. The idea of going to check it out sent a chill down my spine, but curiosity got the better of us. Come on, I said, trying to sound brave. Let's see what it is. We approached the storage room slowly, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the gym's walls. When we reached the door, I hesitated, hand hovering over the cold metal handle. I glanced at David, who gave me a nervous nod. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle. To my surprise, the door creaked open. The room was pitch black, and the light switch didn't work when I flicked it. The only light came from the faint glow of the gym behind us. As we peered inside, the sound of the laughter grew louder, but it was warped, like a record being played at the wrong speed. Hello, I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, just more of that eerie laughter. David stepped back, clearly unnerved. This is messed up, man. We should go. But something in the room caught my eye, an old, dusty mirror leaning against the wall. I hadn't noticed it before, but as I looked into it, I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. In the reflection, I could see the gym behind us, but there was something else, something that shouldn't be there. A figure stood just inside the gym, a shadowy silhouette with no discernible features. It was watching us. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing there. The gym was empty. I looked back at the mirror, and the figure was gone. The laughter stopped abruptly, leaving a heavy silence that pressed down on us like a weight. "Let's get out of here," I whispered, feeling a wave of cold fear wash over me. David didn't argue. We bolted out of the storage room, slamming the door shut behind us. We didn't stop running until we were out of the gym and back into the main school building, where the fluorescent lights seemed almost too bright after the oppressive darkness of the gym. We never talked about what we saw or thought we saw in that mirror. But from that day on, neither of us ever stayed late in the gym alone again. The old storage room was sealed off soon after, the school citing structural issues, but I always wondered if they knew the truth. Sometimes, when I pass by the gym at night, I still hear that faint echo of laughter, like the lingering memory of something that never really left. And every time, it sends a shiver down my spine. It happened during my sophomore year in high school, and to this day, I can't walk past that locker without feeling a cold chill creep up my spine. It was an ordinary Wednesday afternoon, and the school was beginning to empty out as students headed home. I had stayed late to finish a history project in the library, which was located on the second floor near the older part of the school. The building had been renovated several times, but certain sections still held the eerie charm of a bygone era. This was especially true of the East Wing, where the old lockers stood, relics from the 1950s, dented and worn with H. As I was heading to my locker to grab my backpack, I noticed something strange. The hallway was unusually quiet, more so than it should have been. Normally, even after school hours, you could hear the faint chatter of teachers or the distant sound of footsteps. But today, it was dead silent. It was as if the building itself was holding its breath. I reached my locker, spun the combination, and opened it. As I did, a cold draft swept past me, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. That's when I heard a faint whisper, so soft that at first, I thought I was imagining it. "Help me." I froze, my hand still on the door. The voice was coming from inside the locker, or at least it seemed that way. It was a raspy whisper, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. My heart pounded in my chest, and I glanced around, expecting to see someone playing a prank. But the hallway was completely empty. "Help me," the voice repeated, more insistent this time, against every instinct screaming at me to run. I leaned closer to the locker, peering inside. All I saw were my textbooks, a hoodie, and some crumpled papers. There was nothing out of the ordinary, but the voice was unmistakable, panicking. I slammed the locker shut and backed away. The whispering stopped abruptly, leaving only the deafening silence behind. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe I was just tired and hearing things. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that simple. Just as I was about to bolt out of there, I felt the vibration of a text message in my pocket. It was from my friend. "Sarah, where are you? Thought we were meeting at the library." I quickly typed back, "On my way," trying to sound casual despite the fear gripping me. I didn't tell Sarah what happened. I didn't tell anyone. Actually, I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, a product of stress and exhaustion. But the next day, when I passed by that same row of lockers, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The locker right next to mine had been left slightly open, just a crack. Inside, scrawled on the rusted metal door in faded ink, were the words, "Help me." I never stayed late at school again after that. Whatever was whispering in that locker, I didn't want to find out. Some things are better left alone, hidden behind metal doors that should never be opened. I've always hated the old stairwell at school. It's narrow, poorly lit, and tucked away in a corner of the building that no one seems to use anymore. But one rainy afternoon, I found myself alone, taking those very stairs after staying late to finish a math test. The building was almost deserted, with most of the students and teachers already gone for the day. As I descended the stairs, the sound of my footsteps echoed unnervingly off the cracked, tiled walls. The dim light bulbs above flickered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to dance with every step I took. Halfway down, I felt a sudden drop in temperature, as if I had walked into a freezer. I pulled my jacket tighter, quickening my pace. That's when I noticed an odd shape on the landing below. It was just a shadow at first, a trick of the light, I thought. But as I got closer, it didn't move like a shadow should. It was darker, more solid, and it seemed to pulse slightly, as though it were breathing. I stopped in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't make out what it was, just a vaguely human figure, standing there, perfectly still. I looked up, hoping to find a source of light that could be casting it, but the bulbs above were dim and steady. There was nothing that could explain it. The shadow didn't move, didn't shift. It just stared. If a shadow could stare. I swallowed hard, trying to shake the growing sense of dread clawing at my gut. Every rational part of my mind told me it was nothing, just my imagination running wild in the half-light of the stairwell. But something deeper, something primal, told me to turn around and run. Instead, I took a slow, tentative step forward. The shadow remained where it was, but the air around me grew even colder. I felt a strange pressure on my chest, like something was pushing down on me, making it hard to breathe. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. It echoed back at me, but the shadow didn't respond. It was as if the thing was waiting for me to make the next move. I took another step, and that's when the shadow suddenly flickered, almost like a candle being blown by an unseen wind. It elongated, stretching toward me, and for a brief, terrifying moment, it felt like it was trying to reach out, to touch me. Panic surged through me, and I bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. I didn't stop until I was back in the hallway, breathless and sweating. I looked back, but the stairwell was empty, no shadow, no flickering lights, just silence and the steady hum of the building. I told myself it was nothing, that I just imagined the whole thing. But even now, whenever I pass that stairwell, I can't help but glance over my shoulder, and every time, I swear I see something shift in the corner of my eye, a shadow that shouldn't be there, waiting for someone to notice it. I always thought the stories about our school being haunted were just rumors. Every school has them, right? But what happened to me one late afternoon made me reconsider. It was a Friday, and I had stayed after school to finish some work in the art room. I liked the quiet, the way the sunlight filtered through the dusty windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Everyone else had already gone home, and the halls were eerily silent, except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. As I was packing up, I realized I had left my sketchbook in my locker. The art room was on the third floor, and my locker was all the way in the basement, a part of the school I usually avoided. It was old and rarely used, with flickering lights and an unsettling, musty smell. But I needed that sketchbook for the weekend, so I forced myself to go down. The basement hallway was darker than I remembered. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting a sickly yellow glow. I could hear my footsteps echoing off the tiled floor as I walked, the sound making me feel more alone than ever. I reached my locker, and as I was spinning the combination, I heard something faint at first, like a distant hum. It grew louder, becoming a low, rhythmic chanting. My heart started to race. I told myself it was just the old pipes groaning, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I grabbed my sketchbook and slammed the locker shut, the bang reverberating through the empty hall. The chanting stopped abruptly, replaced by an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. That's when I heard a soft, dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across the floor. It came from around the corner, near the old, unused classrooms at the far end of the basement. I knew I should leave, but something compelled me to move forward, to see what was making that noise. As I approached the corner, the air grew colder, and the lights began to flicker more intensely. My breath came in shallow gasps, the fear almost paralyzing. I peered around the corner, expecting to see something horrifying, but there was nothing. Just an empty hallway, with the doors to the old classrooms slightly ajar. The dragging sound had stopped, but the silence felt more threatening than any noise. I turned to leave, but then I noticed something strange, a faint shadow moving under one of the classroom doors, as if someone, or something, was inside. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I slowly backed away. I didn't wait to find out what was in that room. I turned and sprinted down the hall. not stopping until I was outside in the cool evening air, gasping for breath. I never told anyone what happened that day. I'm not sure they would believe me, but even now, I avoid the basement at all costs, because every time I pass by that stairwell, I can still hear that faint chanting, like an echo of something that never left.